Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the show. Our topic this week is, how terrible is that? The host can't even remember, but I just wanted to word it properly. Our topic this week is keeping the faith, staying strong for the long term. So we're on 90.6 FM. If you've got any questions, please send them into our Instagram, Converts in Conversation. But yeah, let's get started. So we've just had a brief chat there. I had a question I was thinking in the car over here today. And really, I mean, in the Western concept of marriage, we have the idea of the 7-year itch, and sort of at 7 years, that is like a defining point in marriage, whether things carry on for the long term. How happy you are at 7 years tends to determine how happy you are for the rest of your marriage. I was just wondering if, we've all been Muslim everyone here has been Muslim for at least 5 years, or I think 7 upwards here today. So really, do you think there's a point when you convert where you have this defining sort of, this is it now for me? Did anyone have that? Is anyone waiting to have that? Or what are people's thoughts?
Okay, yeah, I'll start, seeing as I've already said something unofficially. I don't think so, Alice, because I think it really just depends on the person, in the sense that not just how you came to Islam or what your support system is like when you first come to Islam, but literally how your personality is. Because again, like you said, we were talking about this a little bit before we came on air. And I know, Zahra, one of the points that you made was that, if you are the kind of person that you are affected a lot by what other people think, then I think that it can take you longer to get to a point where you're comfortable in yourself. Because if you're looking outward too much, and you're looking outward at what other people or other people's opinions are of you, or you're influenced so much by what other people expect of you, then I think it can take you a longer time possibly to get to that point where you feel comfortable in your own skin. Whereas if you're a person who has I don't want to say stronger and the other person is weaker, but if you have a more kind of set way with yourself, and you're less influenced by what other people expect of you, then I think your journey can be a little bit more flowing in its kind of progress. What does everybody else think?
For me, I think there's more times when I plateau. So it's not necessarily an itch where I feel like, I need to do something else, or I'm settled now, or I'm not settled. But there are definitely times where I probably become lax in some things, and maybe my faith or my belief hasn't wavered in any way, but maybe how engaged I am, how motivated I am to try and go online and find classes. And I do suppose I go up and down when it comes to things like that, but generally, I was just you get to the end of your but yeah, I go generally up and down, and then it's normally something that happens, whether it be to me or in life, that gives me a bit of a kick to think, okay, I need to get connected again now. I need to be more proactive. But generally, when it comes to outsiders, I do listen to what other people say, but I think relatively early on I found that I can take it on board, I can reflect on it, but it doesn't tend to affect me in a way that I know that it does affect some other people. I've always been quite independent in that way, and that's just me as a person.
That's the word I was looking for, independent. I couldn't think of the word.
I think just because I think it's maybe being an only child and growing up, I'm quite happy in my own company, and so whilst I appreciate everybody's input most of the time, it's not what ultimately leads me to making a decision about anything, if that makes sense.
Jodie, have you got any opinions on this?
I think for me, I'm just thinking longer term. I think I used to be very dependent on like YouTube and sort of I'm doing air quotes, like Instagrammy influencer type people. And then we always had, hijab gate with many of them and all the rest of it. And I think those are the things that made me go, actually, if I depend on other people, I'm going to make this journey. It's not going to work for me. So actually things like that for me were really helpful, because they got me questioning, assumptions or I suppose dependencies that I had. not necessarily like, this person must remain like this, otherwise I won't be. But there was a definite sort of dependency on other people's identity for my own identity. And I think I've, in the long term, let that go by thinking, that this is each individual's journey and that's okay. I feel a bit more robust in myself, if that makes sense.
I think also, sorry, I am the oldest person here, so I'm going to use the age card. But
you have been Muslim for a lot longer than us as well. So.
Yeah, but I think not just even being Muslim for longer, but just being alive for longer. I, as a person, tend to really not care really about what other people think anymore, and that has really helped me as a Muslim because I'm not Muslim because of somebody else. I'm not Muslim because this is happening around me. I feel more stable in my Islam because I feel like I understand myself better. I think that's a key, actually. I think if you understand who you are, then it's easier to make changes in hopefully stable, small, incremental steps. And so you don't get to like a tipping point. I mean, we were talking about like the 7-year itch. And yeah, Zahra's mentioned, okay, she didn't feel like she had to make changes after a certain time. But also there's that idea of, is there a watershed that you get to where you think, I've had this many years under my belt, shall I jump into the pool and go, right, this is me now? I think it's more, these changes that you tend to make, if they're made slowly and steadily, then they become you and not like a surface shell of you.
I think that's everything you've said is really profound. It's actually kind of made me realise as well in myself, like I've never really sort of had I've never wavered in my faith in terms of I've never thought, do I still believe this? Is this what I want? I've never had that, but I care very much what other people think of me, and I always have, and I'm very much a people pleaser. I like people to think good of me. I mean, now as I'm getting older, I'm less concerned, and that has been why with some aspects of being Muslim I have struggled because I care too much what other people think, but with actually being Muslim and doing what is required of me as a Muslim, I've never wavered in that, but with some of the other aspects I have struggled.
That's why when in the years that I've kind of been involved in convert or revert support, I've usually said to people, when I can see that somebody is struggling, I usually say to them, look, just as much as there is benefit in being around a support network, being actually physically with people who maybe are like-minded and on the same struggle path as you, sometimes there is absolute benefit in just pulling away and just having time for yourself, by yourself, because otherwise you don't give yourself time to really think who you are. And I think if you just kind of go and ride the wave and you get lost in that whole sea of, well, I'm a new Muslim, so I should do this and I should do that, then you come out the other end and you've actually forgotten who you are, and it's a very confusing place to be.
Definitely. I think that's true.
Just sort of thinking about what you've said about it being very difficult for you because you listen too much or care too much about what people say, sort of being on the flip side of it and being someone who has never really, sounds harsh, but never really cared what people thought or had to say. I think when you become a new Muslim and sort of when you're a bit further down the line, I don't know if I get to call myself a new Muslim anymore. Being
do we call ourselves old Muslims?
Yeah. Maybe we just call ourselves Muslims.
Yes, that would be a preference. But sort of, I've had to teach myself or encourage myself to actually listen what people have to say, not to let it affect me to the point of where it changes everything, but I think it is important to maybe reflect on, definitely when you're a Muslim and you're sort of out there as being visible and accessible in certain ways, to listen to what other people have to say and advice that people give you, especially when it comes with good intention, as opposed to putting that wall up and refusing point blank to listen to what anybody else has to say. So that's sort of a flip side to that. I suppose there's pitfalls to both ways.
So I think really what we could say is the key is the balance, isn't it?
Yes.
As we've kind of come to the conclusion in pretty much every single show, that it's the balance of how you live your life, that you're not swaying too much with the pendulum one way, you're not swinging too much the other way. It's having that nice kind of slow balance, and actually that takes time. For some people, alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah that actually they can do it straight away. But I think that's the minority, not the majority.
And I think as well, sort of what we were saying about if your relationship to Islam is too informed by your relationship with other people, it can be very difficult in terms of if you have a difficult relationship with specific people in your life, that then becomes an issue with Islam or something like that. So it's separating that relationship.
Also, when it comes to listening to what people have to say, especially when they've got opinions about you, it's who you're listening to and the company that you're in, is that valued and does it come with good intention? So that comes back to something else that we've previously discussed, I think, which is about surrounding yourself with people who you trust and whose opinion you value and where you're coming from the same point of view, and why is it that they're imparting their opinion on you or suggesting how you should maybe deal with a situation. You have to really think about who you're surrounding your time with.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break now, and we'll be back after this short break with some more chat about being Muslim for the long haul and what that can look like, and the challenges and the positives and everything that comes with it. So we'll be back after this. Assalamu alaikum. It's Sunday and it's now about 20 past 2. You're listening to Converts in Conversation on Heritage Radio 90.6 FM. Today our topic is, I can't remember what it is again. It's about basically staying the long term. Let me find the actual title. I do apologise, I'm not prepared at all. Keeping the faith, staying strong for the long term. So we had a bit of a discussion beforehand, but what I wanted to talk about now really, to kind of open the discussion, I did a podcast just bigging it up again with that Revert girl, Catherine, who is someone we should be getting on the show, inshallah, quite soon to have a discussion. And she came up with a fantastic, what's the word I'm trying to think? Analogy. That's it. About difficulties that come when you become Muslim and you're carrying on with your faith, and that is, there is so much to being a Muslim, and there is so much to learn, and there is so much to do, and it can become overwhelming. And sometimes in the early days you feel like you have to do all this stuff straight away, and either people kind of embrace that and try and do everything, or it's just like, this is too much, I can't do this. And that's very much a headspace I got to, and I look back now and there's definitely a couple of years at least where I was almost like lost in the wilderness, and I was doing what is expected of me as a Muslim, but I wasn't really learning more, improving myself, because it just seemed like it's just too much. And if I could go back now, even if I just dedicated 5 minutes a week, half an hour a week to learning something new, oh my God, I just think about where I would be now. Obviously, alhamdulillah, things happen for a reason, and it's all part of the path, and I would never, it's all part of my journey. But I just wish I hadn't become so overwhelmed. What are other people's experiences of this?
I was just going to say, Alice, do you feel like you were going through the motions in those first years?
I just felt like, how on earth am I expected to know all? And with me, and again, it's all about ego, isn't it? I would get frustrated, like, well, how on earth am I meant to know all of this? Rather than thinking, okay, well, take it slow, take it steady. It was just like a complete, like, well, I just can't do it, can I? That kind of, when you're younger and you can't do something, you just go, well, I can't do it, can I? Yeah. It was like that. It was that was coming out, because that was obviously how I was making excuses for myself, really.
It's interesting because as you were talking, Alice, I was just thinking, how did I feel in those first 30 years? And actually, one of the things that I wish is that I was able to go back to myself now and say to myself, look, you want to be Muslim, inshallah, for the rest of your life, not just for the next month or the next, year. But classically, everybody who knows me knows I'm a really bad long-term thinker. But if I'd been able to tell myself that, funnily enough, I was able to do that with my kids, though. And I don't know, Jodie, if you and Alice, you've both got kids, but my kids are older now. But I know when they were young and I was trying to teach them. And even now when people say to me, oh, I don't know what to do. My daughter, she's 13 and she's decided she doesn't want to pray. What shall I do? And it's funny, I'm able to give other people the advice, but I wish I'd been able to give myself the advice to say, look, better that, okay, they spend a few, like some mornings sleeping in, they don't pray Fajr, and okay, that's not great, but think for the long term. What's going to give you that longevity in your faith? And I think that's what I wish I'd told myself when I was first, looking into Islam, especially when I first became Muslim. I didn't know any Muslims, so I had kind of random people saying, oh, my friend's sister's cousin is Muslim, maybe you should meet her. So I was just trying to reach out to anybody who was Muslim. And I'd meet people, and yeah, I was very much kind of a person who I would end up molding myself to the person that I was with, because thinking that would be the way for success. And I would be trying to be all these different people all at the same time, losing myself in the process, and then not actually understanding what Islam meant. Did Islam mean that I dressed like that, or did Islam mean that I thought this way? And really, it would have been better for me sometimes to spend time by myself, which is actually the advice that I do give some people sometimes. If they're struggling and if they feel they've got too many voices going on, then I say, look, sometimes it's actually really good to pull back and have a bit of time, you and Allah, if you like, where you're just thinking. I'm not saying where you have to sit and take on knowledge and study Arabic or whatever. Just sit and be yourself and think and connect back to the reason that you wanted to follow the truth in the first place.
Anyone else want to chime in?
I think listening to that, I can really relate to it, and this whole I'm going to fit in with X, Y and Z because then I'll feel like a real Muslim. It reminds me of like Pinocchio. Yeah, I'm a real boy. And it's that thing of just finding who you are, and I think the only way to do that, find yourself as a Muslim, is with compassion and being able to say, actually, so I'm thinking about my little boy now, and he's 4. And I'd never dream of going, right, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, let's get up and let's go and pray Fajr, because he'd just be like, Mummy, what are you doing? Whereas if he sees me get the prayer mat out, he wants to get his little prayer mat out, and he copies me and he goes, Allahu Akbar and mashallah, it's lovely. But he's coming from that as I do that with my mummy, and that's love, and that's nice, and Allah loves me. Not, these are these sets of rules that you must do, and we must be like other people. And it all comes from a place of love and compassion, and I think that's the only longevity way that we can really approach this.
I completely agree. I completely agree, Jodie. Honestly, the amount of time, and actually, subhanAllah, there is a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, and this is paraphrasing, this is not exact words, where anything that is done with gentleness and kindness is beautiful, and Allah loves beauty. Yeah.
So I mentioned briefly Catherine's analogy. So basically, to explain what she said, which I think is so profound and really just such great advice for reverts, is if you were to start going to the gym, you wouldn't just walk in and start benching like 100 kg. You would work your way up. You'd start with 5. You do that for a week or so. You move up to 10. It's little and often, and that's really sort of how you need to approach Islam as well. And an example of that, I remember this sister on Instagram, I think she's a born Muslim sister. She wanted to start implementing praying 5 times a day. And a lot of us, I think we think, go from not praying and then you go to 5 prayers a day. She started with Fajr. She was like, I thought, it's only 2 rak'ah, I'll start with Fajr and then go from there. And slowly over time she built it up and implemented, and now she says like she can't even imagine not praying. Like, it's just so intrinsic. And that way she did it, where it was, rather than going from not having prayed for X amount of years to praying 5 salat a day, she slowly implemented it to the point then it became just part of her life. And I thought that was a really beautiful kind of way, and a great advice for reverts as well, actually.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, because I've taught prayer workshops, and one of the things I've said to people when I've been teaching them is, I'm teaching you this, and we start off actually learning the Fajr prayer because it is the shortest, it is the 2 rak'ah. But for some people, I usually say to them, okay, you know that at some point, a bit like the whole bench press kind of like analogy, you're inshallah going to work your way up to 5 times a day prayer. But I say, usually pick the one that you think you're not going to miss. So for most people, I say, well, you're going to go to bed at some point. So maybe pick the one just before bed, if that you think that's the one that, okay, that one's going to be the regular one. But the other thing I usually say to people is, but be aware of what the other 5 times are, and just at least be conscious, maybe take a minute out to think about Allah at that point. So those 5 times are already there, kind of as markers in your day. Maybe not, you've not got into the full 5 times a day actual prayer, but they're there kind of as points in your day that you know that you will at some point be able to work that up.
And see, for me, it was Maghrib that was the one, because, and I don't know if this is a South Asian thing or if this is but Maghrib seems like quite like an important defining time of the day. It's like, okay, we'll meet up after Maghrib. Okay, I see you. We'll do it, but then I've got to be home by Maghrib. I don't know. It just seems like a really it's like a crucial time for people. So that was the one that I was able to implement first, because it'd be like, okay, well, I'm meeting the girls, but we're not meeting up till after Maghrib. You know, so it was, so it's easy to start with that one for me, really. But yeah, has anyone got any other, before we go to a break, I
think just that whole slow and steady thing, for me, I tend to really look into something and think about how likely it is that I can stick to something before I actually take it on board and start it. I know that before we were talking about, sort of, with me, one of the easier things that I found to implement relatively early on, well, probably after about 12 months, 18 months, was wearing hijab. And it was something that I really thought about, and I tried it out a little bit, and I thought, well, if I'm going to start wearing it, then I need to make sure that it's something that I can stick to. And alhamdulillah, that's been something that I personally haven't struggled with. Not that I don't have days when I wish I didn't have to wear it, and days where I think, oh God, I just look awful in this. But alhamdulillah, it's not something where it's ever pushed me to want to take it off. Whereas music is one of my huge struggles. I know that we're not supposed to. I know that there's different opinions on that. I know that I tend to feel better if I don't listen to it and I listen to Quran, or I listen to a talk or some poetry, or even listening to classical music. Sometimes I find it's sort of a middle ground for me. But yeah, that's one of my huge struggles, and I have to take it really slow and steady. I've tried to listen to nasheed sometimes, and then there's also some ones that people argue whether it's nasheed or is it music. Just because it's by a Muslim guy, it doesn't necessarily make it a nasheed. And so I try and find ways to slowly implement the changes, but then I end up falling off the wagon with that one relatively daily.
But it's interesting that you say that, or I fall off the wagon. I think another thing I think that's important is that a person allows themselves to not be perfect at something that they're trying for the first time. You like Jodie was saying, compassion and kindness to yourself, because if you don't, and if you're too hard on yourself, you'll actually push yourself the other way. You'll be so disappointed, you'll be so kind of annoyed with yourself, a bit like what Alice was saying, kind of like chucking the baby out with the bathwater, going, that's it, I've had it, I can't do it anymore. Whereas when you go into something, don't go in thinking, oh yes, I'm going to fail, because obviously that's not going to be a good positive message to yourself. But at least tell yourself, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to make dua that Allah helps me with it. What practical things am I going to put into place? Like, for example, I'm going to really try and wake up for Fajr this week. Oh, well, let's set the alarm, or whatever it is. So you put in the practical implementations that you need to put in. You also make dua, but then you also say to yourself, and if I can't do it straight away, then I'll not give up. Or maybe you have a list, and you've got 2 things in your life. You think, I really wish I could start praying Fajr, but I really wish I could start, I don't know, reading 1 page of Quran a day. And you realise that actually you just don't have the energy or the mental capacity to do both at the same time. So you pick one, and you don't ever belittle the good that you're doing, because I think that's a real negative point that shaitan can easily get you with, is that you start belittling the good that you're doing, or you start belittling yourself and saying, well, I'm doing nothing. I'm doing absolutely nothing. And that's not helpful at all.
No, definitely not. Another thing is, and it's a video that Alice posted this week, which I found really interesting, and triggered isn't the word. It's when people seek to justify, and it's something that I have to sort of check myself about a lot, that it's not that it's okay as in I'd give myself a high five for not achieving something that we're supposed to do, or doing something that we're not supposed to do. I would never give myself a high five for it, but at the same time I wouldn't seek to justify it. I wouldn't try and convince myself that one of the reasons I'm not doing it, or I'm not quite there yet, isn't because ultimately we don't really have to do that anyway, or there's any justification for it. It's that I'm just not there yet with all of these things, and comforting yourself that that's okay, because inshallah I'll get there one day, or I'll get strong in that aspect one day, is really important. And I try and surround myself with people who are quite transparent about that as well, that this is something that I should be able to do. I can't do it yet, and I might either maybe one day I can, but I would never want someone to say, no, it's all right, you don't have to do that anyway, or something like that.
So honest but caring people, that's who you need around you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we're going to go for a quick break now, and we'll be back. So you're listening to Heritage Radio 90.6 FM, Converts in Conversation. We'll be back after this. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Converts in Conversation at 90.6 FM Heritage Radio. So, you know what? I'm so sorry. This is the third time I've forgotten what the title of this show is. I'm sorry. Sorry. Today,
disaster. We've got squeaky chairs, squeaky mics.
I do apologise. Absolute mess.
It's our old age in our memory.
Sorry. Keeping the faith, staying strong for the long term. It's because it's a long time. I just can't remember. My brain's not there, you know. So really, what we wanted to talk in this section of the show is what to do when someone is struggling. And I've got to be honest, this actually triggered me a little bit, because I am very much a sister I know, actually. I wonder if she's listening today. Shout out to her, Imani. She shared a video on Facebook today, and it was about the saying that is like the most hated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is worry about yourself. Like, if someone gives you advice, you just say worry about yourself, right? I'm guilty of that. If someone gives me any advice, it's like just concentrate on yourself. But to the point that if I see someone that genuinely does need some, I'm just like, just leave them to it. Like, I very much don't even. So like, even sometimes, like, I've shared like with people, like friends, like situations in the past that I've had with a sister, and I'm like, oh, and check this, and then she said this, and it's like something that's like wrong, you know, and they're like, well, why didn't you correct her? And I'm like, it's not my place, is it? You know, like, I very much, and I use that as almost like so I don't take any responsibility for other people, but then I'm the first one to say, oh, well, you know, there needs to be more support, but then I'm not doing anything, you know, very much, honestly. Anyway, so what are other people's thoughts on this?
Well, okay, I'm going to talk about my idea of what support actually is. It's from my own experience, and actually experience of trying to support other people as well. Firstly, I think one of the important things when it comes to support is to actually know that person, because it is really difficult. I mean, I have tried it, in all honesty, because I've been in that place where I've seen somebody do something that I know clearly is not actually correct, but I think, well, I don't really know you, so how do I talk about this? And yeah, Alice, I've done that too, where I've gone, oh, well, I don't know that person very well, so maybe I shouldn't say anything, and I'm sure somebody who knows them better will actually say something. But other times I do feel the responsibility. I have to say, I make a quick dua at that point to ask Allah to help me to come out with something that doesn't sound absolutely offensive, and just that I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I do it all possible, even if it's in a group setting, try and take that person to one side and just say, you know, sister, I don't know if you're aware, but such and such. And yeah, I've sometimes had it thrown back in my face where, like, I'm sorry, sister, but I know this. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then at least I feel like I've, you know, hands up, Allah, I try to do the best that I could do. But actually the best scenario is where you know somebody, because you know yourself, you will only take advice from somebody. I mean, it's very hard to take advice full stop, but you'd only really take advice from somebody if you know they care about you, and you know that they're saying it. I mean, think about it, like, who cares about you the most? Your mum. And your mum is going to mostly at some point have given you advice that you're going to go, wow, mum, you just don't know. But later on you think, yeah, that was really bad, because I know she loves me and she's only doing that because she loves me. And that's the only time you'll really take on advice, is if you know that person has really got your back, really wants the best for you. And it's very difficult if you don't know the person you're giving advice to. A, you don't know their situation very well. B, you don't really know the experiences they've gone through that have brought them to this point where they're struggling. Because that's the other thing I want to say, that when you see somebody, maybe they've made a change in their life. And okay, I'm not a person who does social media, but I know that is the way the world works. And people are usually kind of putting stuff on social media, and then there'll be kind of like some knee-jerk reaction comments to it. But when somebody has made some sort of flip change in their life that you weren't expecting, it's not really the first thing that they've done. They've usually been struggling up to that point, and this is now kind of indicative of breakdown, that this is happening. So, you know, like, if you don't know that person, it can be very easy to be judgmental. It can be very easy to assume. And that's the word I want to pick up on, because there are so many assumptions that are made when you see somebody struggling, that it's very easy to come at them with advice that is not really advice, and it's more judgment, and that person is just actually going to go further down their negative spiral. So one of the main things for supporting somebody is, like everybody's been saying, the compassion, the kindness, and really, if you can, just try and put yourself in their place, and try and empathize and think that person is having a hard time. Recently, I had somebody reach out to me, and they have been Muslim for so many years. I just assumed, again, there's that word, I assumed they were doing okay. And they sent me a message, and they even said in this message, and I'm not even somebody that they're close to, they said in this message, I'm even finding it difficult to write this and tell you how much I'm struggling. And my heart just went out to that person. I thought, yeah, I mean, because I know I have a hard time telling people when I'm struggling, and this person is possibly the same as me. So it's really trying to put yourself in that person's shoes and say to yourself, you know, if this person is struggling, what can I do to help? That has to be the angle that you're coming from.
I think for me that's what compassion is. It's noticing a need or a suffering or a struggle, but then having the motivation to do something about it. You know, that intention but actual action. It reminds me of a time where it was very early days when I was praying in congregation, and I didn't know the ruling in terms of if you'd arrived late, because there was a queue for, you know, making wudu and all the rest of it. If you arrived late, at what point do you need to repeat certain parts? So I just ran in and thought, right, there's the space and light, I'm just going to carry on. And then I went to leave after we'd finished, and this sister who I did not know came up to me, lovely smile on her face, and went, sister, just to let you know, actually you need to repeat this part, and you know, I don't mind staying with you if you're okay. And I was like, that's beautiful. And it was just a lovely thing to do, because one, my prayer, inshallah, was valid, because I went back and, you know, topped it up, so to say. But also she came with a really pure intention. It wasn't coming over and judging, you've done that wrong, which is so easy to do. She'd come with this really open thing of just in case you didn't know, sister. And it was a really beautiful, neutral but compassionate place to come from, I think.
One of the things that helps me to not get judgmental is that when I see somebody, or somebody approaches me and they're struggling, I literally, you know, like I let it flash through my brain all the struggles I've had and all the ways that I've been helped or I wish I'd been helped. Because if you approach somebody thinking, I wish somebody had spoken to me this way, then hopefully that's a good kind of footing right from the beginning.
Definitely, it's really, really good, because it is something that I struggle with, and I think it comes also from this whole people pleasing. Don't want people to think bad of me. Just want everyone to, you know. So I do struggle. And also, I think it's because I think, who am I to tell anyone anything? As well, it's that sort of feelings I have.
But that's perfect. I mean, humility definitely is one of the things that you need to approach people with, because anybody that comes to you with arrogance in whatever scenario, it's immediately going to get that person's back up. The barrier's going to go up, and that person's not going to see you as somebody that they can turn to when they need help. Sometimes people are struggling and they cannot find the words with which to come to you with. So it's having that kind of intuitive empathy. Not everybody maybe has the time or the mental capacity for it, but if you are approached, to actually have that kind of awareness.
So sometimes just listen. Don't make a judgment. Don't make assumptions. Sometimes support isn't in the form of imparting wisdom or having a suggestion on how someone should do something or what they should do. Sometimes they can work it out themselves. They just need a sounding board, just someone to listen to understand and be non-judgmental. I think that people, certainly one of my worries is that people judge and then share the information. People need to know that you're a safe place, that if they have that conversation with you, that's not then going to be tea time talk, kind of, that you're going to be like, oh, guess what?
Or your next thing on Facebook.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a trust
not
in you, isn't it? You know, that information is a trust.
Yeah.
And it's, unfortunately, some people don't keep that trust, but most, inshallah, will.
Yeah.
And I think it's being able to trust any sister, like that sister that came up to me. I did not know her at all. I'd never met her, and it was this automatic thing of, you've come with a good intention, therefore I trust that you're I sort of explained to her,
And
I
that
don't
is
really
the
know
other
what I'm
thing.
doing, and that was safe.
Intention
Yeah.
is a huge thing, because I think
Absolutely.
sometimes, and not all the time at all, but people worry that when people are asking, oh, I saw such a body is no longer X, or I saw somebody's no longer doing such a thing, people are like, why? What happened? Why are you asking? Are you asking because you want to help, or because you've just been a little bit nosy? I mean, we all have a bit of a nosy bone in us. Let's not pretend we haven't. But we should be checking ourselves before we're asking questions, because you don't want to get a reputation for someone who's just asking because you're being nosy. You're asking because you care.
Asking with compassion.
I think another thing is, this is like advice for anybody who's sitting there thinking, well, I can't really help somebody who's struggling because I don't have so much knowledge myself, or, maybe I'm not doing so well myself. Everybody needs to feel that they're understood, and one of the best ways, like Zahra was saying, is just to be the listening ear. Sometimes a person doesn't want to talk to you because they want you to fix their problem or to actually have the solution for them. They just want to know that they're not alone, and that they can actually express themselves, and somebody will be caring enough to just sit and listen non-judgmentally.
Absolutely, and that's something that is kind of quite universal. I've just put together some suicide prevention training for staff at work, mostly for reception staff, because they tend to get the brunt. And it was really just kind of what not to say. So what not to say is essentially try and give advice, try and jolly people out of it, asking lots of questions, and what on my slide that says what to do when someone expresses they're suicidal, listen in capital letters.
Yes.
Just listen and talk about it, because talking about suicide doesn't increase the likelihood that someone will do it. If anything, it gives them that, okay, just let it out, talk about it, and being non-judgmental, not sharing your opinions on suicide, not trying to make that person feel guilty. Oh, but if it's listen, be non-judgmental, and really that's it, really. And it's the same sort of thing with this as well.
And I know I think it is a lot harder now when we're in this kind of pandemic, and I saw Zahra today and I was like, oh, I just want to give you a hug, and that kind of just like physical contact for a hug sometimes can just make a person feel so much better. And it's sad that it's not a possibility now. So I think it's even harder to kind of be aware of people who are struggling, because everybody's just kind of at the end of their phone, or the end of their screen, and it's just not the same.
I do think one of the nice things that's come out of the pandemic is that it feels that generally when people ask now, are you okay, they mean it. It feels a lot more heartfelt these days when people are saying, are you okay? Is your family okay? That they really mean it. And I don't know if, hopefully that's something that will stick around beyond the pandemic and beyond all this isolation and quarantine times. Hopefully that's something that will stick to being a little bit more understanding, empathetic and caring of each other. But definitely it's something that I have found a beauty in. This awful year that has been. Alhamdulillah.
We're just going to go to a couple of adverts, and then when we'll come back, we're just going to kind of really try to wrap up and just kind of give some tips about what's helped us all stay the course for the long term. But we'll be back after this. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Converts in Conversation. We're just wrapping up our show now. We've got a few minutes left until the news, and really we just wanted to discuss
how to stay for the long term.
Thank you for meaning I don't have to check my phone because I'd forgotten again what the title of today's show was.
I need to make them more punchy.
So really it's just, has anyone got any kind of also things like, if I'd just known that then what I know now, because there are certain, like I was saying earlier, if I had just taken even 5, 10, 15 minutes a week to improve my knowledge, there were a couple of years that were just sort of, I really didn't take the opportunity, and I really wish, you should never have regret about things that happened in the past, because it's all part of the plan that has been put in place for you. And obviously alhamdulillah, like I'm doing things now, but there is time before where I let my own ego get in the way, and I didn't. So has anyone else got any sort of things, if they knew then what they know now?
I would definitely tell myself, take your time, Almas. This is not a race. It's not going to finish in a year. You don't have to be some scholar by the end of the month. And that trust in Allah, that He has always got your back. I'm still telling myself this because clearly I still haven't learnt it. But to always try something and do the best that you can, but then know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always got your back and loves you. The fact that you want to try for his sake means that you're already a success, you know. Not that you don't want to feel big-headed or anything, but just because I know I'm a person who kind of does myself down too much, so I kind of need to go the other way a little bit just to keep a balance.
I think for me it would be, rather than focusing on everybody's opinions and all the rules that people give out without evidence, justification, etc., all the rules that you follow that people say, oh, you know, you don't have to do that, rather than focusing on all that, just focus on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I think in the beginning you can feel so overwhelmed by the unsolicited advice and the pressures you put on yourself, like me watching YouTube hijabis and think it wasn't helpful. But if I'd taken that time and used that to focus on my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think I would be more happy with my journey as I am now. Like Alice says, you don't regret the journey, but I think the journey might have been quite different.
Yeah, and I would love, I mean, one of my main reasons for doing this show is I would love for people not to make the mistakes that I made and kind of the time I wasted. And obviously everyone's on their own journey, and there was a lot of time where I've never given advice. I've always kind of kept a bit of a distance from the Revert community, just from previous experiences I'd had. So I've always just kind of kept a bit of a distance, and I feel now it's like my time to really start kind of taking responsibility and trying to give back. So that's
I think for me it's not necessarily that I feel like I'm in any kind of position to be able to give anybody advice on how they should live their lives or what they should do. For me it's about providing a safe space for people to go, whew, that's a problem for someone else too, then it's not just me, I'm not by myself. Because I know that looking back at my journey and certainly the start of it, I would have felt really reassured by having that available to me, just to hear that somebody else, I mean, partly in my own doing, early on in my journey I surrounded myself with born Muslims. I did have a few convert friends, but really the majority of my friends were people who were born into it, and so there weren't the same struggles, there weren't the same life experiences, and so if I'd have said it, I mean, maybe some of them would have understood the struggle, but for me I just felt that that wasn't a safe place to air my concerns and struggles and the things that really weren't sitting easy for me. So to be able to have a group of people like us, for example, who'd have been around maybe to just go, oh yes, yeah, I struggle with that too, or yeah, I've experienced that as well.
I think the other thing I would say to myself all those years ago is that almost it's okay to be you. You don't have to suddenly become this strange image of yourself that you're trying to, like Jodie was saying, trying to kind of fit in with all the different aspects of Islam that you see. Allow yourself to be you, and allow yourself to spend time with yourself, to get to know yourself and be yourself as a Muslim. Don't be, you know, the Muslim who fits into that category or the other category. Just be yourself as a Muslim.
That's exactly what Khadija has sent a message pretty much to say. She can't be with us today, and one of our lovely co-hosts has sent a message to say that one of the things that she relies on and tries to remind herself of is that Allah gave us our own personalities, and we should definitely use them to strengthen our own journeys, and it goes back to what we discussed a while ago, which is identity and maintaining who you are, and not thinking that you have to model yourself on other people, and just be mindful on what your intention about what you're trying to adapt if you're looking at other people for guidance.
I think one of the beautiful things is that we know that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he said he was sent to perfect noble character, that was the reason he was sent. And when you look at that, it basically means he was sent so that we could be the best versions of ourselves. Not a different version, but the best version of ourselves. So I think, like everybody's been saying, that know yourself, allow yourself to be yourself, but yet be the best version of yourself.
Yes.
Definitely. And I think actually now I look back on my own journey, this is what's great about this show. It kind of helps you reflect on things that were happening, even if you weren't aware at the time. I know, and I mentioned it in my my podcast episode as well, about sort of 8 to 9 months in, I really was like, you know what, I can't do this. And when I look back now, but that first sort of 8 to 9 months, again, taking a very hard line, completely losing myself, completely not distancing myself from my non-Muslim friends, not really confiding in my family, not even eating my normal cuisine, everything. I just lost myself. And it was when I sort of came back and started doing things on my terms. It was positive in terms of I found myself and I've never wavered, but also I think actually it did play a part in me kind of resting on my laurels for a few years as well, because I was kind of like, I found this comfortable wedge to put myself in. But yeah, find being you, but being Muslim as well. They're not mutually exclusive. So yeah, I think has anyone got any other pearls they want to add, or are we good for today?
Just kind of longevity. Like I say, I'm not a natural long-term thinker, but it really is good to try and think for the long term, and because that way you'll be kinder to yourself and you won't expect so much from yourself, because not only is it difficult to meet other people's expectations, sometimes it's difficult to meet our own when we're too hard on ourselves.
Definitely, I would just echo that, really. Just be kind to yourself, take it easy, step by step, is definitely the way forward.
And tune in 2 p.m. till 3 p.m. on Sundays to Converts in Conversation, 90.6 FM. That's got to get a plug in there too,
Definitely.
But thank you so much, everyone, for listening. As some of you may know, we have started podcasting these episodes, so you can catch up with them on, I think it's Anchor. Is it Anchor and Spotify? Yeah, so we're going to go to the news now. But Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll check in with you next week.